Well, super excited. Obviously, since I've been here, we've done most of our spring practices after spring break, but just the way the calendar laid out this year, kind of where we were coming off the season, what we want to do, we made an adjustment. We'll get in 2 practices before before spring break. So we'll get our first practice on the grass tomorrow. I think we'll actually be in the stadium, but I don't know if the grass is quite ready yet, but we'll get Wednesday and Friday will be kind of just introduction of spiders and helmets. We'll do really just basic football because we're coming on the back end of winter conditioning too. We won't start down the red area, we'll start out in the field, so it'll be kind of early down stuff going forward. Haven't given you guys an update lately, but we're gonna have almost near 20 guys that won't be going through spring ball. Just different guys have surgeries. So Caden Fagan, as you all know, had the surgery. He will not be with us this spring. Everything's on track. Everything's going absolutely awesome. Got to continue to slow him down. I know he's eager to chomp at the bit to get out there. TJ Griffin had postseason shoulder surgery, so he's out. JJ Hurtis will be out for spring ball. A freshman that joined us, he had a knee surgery that he had prior to coming here that we will get him involved this summer. Everything's going in the right direction. Ashton Hollins actually had surgery on both shoulders, so he will be out for the remainder of spring ball. They'll be with us hopefully in the spring or in the summer. Carson Kaiser, still complications from his ACL surgery, so he won't be with us this spring. Andre Lovett also had a pre-existing shoulder injury coming in, so he had surgery and won't be with us this spring out on the field. TJ McMillan had postseason shoulder surgery as well. He will be out for spring ball, join us in the summer. Rio Sanders and Cole Ross will be out at the beginning, but we do hope those guys will join us halfway through from the surgeries that they had prior to the end of the season. Des Schuster also had postseason shoulder surgery, will be out. Miles Scott had post-bowl game surgery on his foot as well as his shoulder, so he will be with us this summer, but he won't be with us this spring. Xavier Scott as well, just healing up some things from the season, won't be with us to start the beginning of spring ball, may be limited with us as we go through it. Grant Smith, also pre-existing shoulder injury before he came here, had shoulder surgery, will be out this spring. Tyler Strain had postseason shoulder injury, shoulder surgery as well. Eddie Turek, unfortunately, about 2-3 weeks ago, had an injury to his foot that had required surgery, so he'll be out during spring. He switched from the defense side of the ball to the offense side. Everything was going good, but obviously this foot injury will curtail him from where we are now. And then Jeremiah Warren also had postseason shoulder surgery as well. So it was kind of the year of the shoulder. Kind of really that was a growing area throughout college football since I've been a head coach. Really the shoulders and the feet have been the biggest postseason injury. So it's a large number of guys out. We have about 111 guys on our roster right now. Had the 24 new guys join us, 12 high school, 12 portal players. So excited about our new coaches. Been around these guys. James just joined us yesterday for his first day. Obviously we've been releasing those as they come out. Mainly have been our secondary, our auxiliary coaches, the assistant to our full-time guys. But the world of college football has changed. Now we can have guys out on the road that aren't part of your 10 assistants. So that's kind of a work in progress, something I'm still working on. Pat, we still have a couple hires in the recruiting personnel department that we'll get through here in the next week. So with that, I'll open up after all that info for some easy questions.
Bret, do you plan on doing a spring game? If so, why not?
No, and really the reason we didn't do a post game or a spring game was back in the fall there was a lot of conversation. We're doing some construction projects into the stadium, some different things that are laid out. Just didn't feel we could work it into the schedule that they wanted. We were getting some outside voices trying to tell us when we're going to lock into the spring game. So at that point I knew we were going to have a pretty big amount of postseason injuries that were going to require surgery, so our numbers are going to be down. So in addition to that, probably the biggest driving force here at the University of Illinois, we have no academic conflicts. We always say that academics take priority. About 35 to 40 of our kids are RST majors, and there's a major class on Tuesday and Thursday that is a non-negotiable those guys needed to take, and it's been a kind of a work in progress, so we actually switched all of our practice dates from Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday to Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and that was probably another reason that we won't. I do think on a couple of those Fridays when we elect to have a scrimmage or a bigger practice, I may open it up for the public and let them come in.
I was gonna say, I think it's pretty exciting about
Yeah.
this. Do you plan on doing a spring game in the future? Because some coaches obviously are choosing not to.
I think probably every year is going to be a little bit different. I don't have anything. I love the spring game because I've always played it once against the world, and I've really liked that. But looking at it, of 18 to 22 starters that we have come back, you think a lot of those guys have a chance to be. There's probably almost half those guys won't be participating in spring ball, and I just didn't want to have that diluted version out there to put on a game.
How has your impression of spring changed over the years? It doesn't seem like a long time ago, but that you couldn't have contact with guys in January and February, but now you can, and it just seems like there's an added level of understanding before you hit that first day of what your expectations are and how we practice and how we do things.
So you mean for
players?
For players?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were able to do a little bit more. You're exactly right with the NCAA rules, but I would say that there, so much of our world has changed just because to have 24 new guys in here,
right.
Which is 25% of my roster. That's really even higher than it was a year ago. So I think the rules are just continuing to catch up with it. I do think there'll be major transformation in not just what we're able to do, but how we're able to do it, and probably as early as next spring. To be quite honest, there's a lot of push to have some type of version of OTAs and some type of team activities in June, which has never been done before. And I just think it's the world of college football continues to evolve.
You talk, Coach, a lot about opportunities in terms of accomplishments coming in this year, coming off 10 wins. So you talk about the playoffs. You talk about how to buy. You talk about how to win a game. Is that part of your conversation? The guy generally or not much?
Well, we'll have a team meeting in here today. I just really kind of talk about how we do our business. I'm going to talk about how we walk in the door. We got 4 things walking in, 4 things walking out. I meet with all the first, so we call it newcomers. So we'll have a meeting before the meeting today that will be just all players that have never been involved in spring football. And I'll just kind of lay the groundwork of the foundation of what we believe in, how we practice, set the expectations. And then the team meeting today will just really be about the setup for schedule for tomorrow. We always start on early downs, so we'll start with first downs tomorrow. It's 45% of the game is usually first downs, and we'll talk about the importance of offense gaining 4, defense holding them 3 or less, how to stay on track. It really doesn't matter what the expectations are coming. It's just kind of, I think I've laid the foundation of what we are and how we try to do it. But yeah, I think, I try to put up something every week that shows them what the outside world thinks of them, right? Either positively or negatively. But I think that the task that we have is we got 15 practices to get really good, and that's kind of the goal.
Going through the roster, I didn't see Terrence Brooks. What's his status?
Yeah, T. Brooks actually, I don't know how I didn't think he wasn't actually with us at the bowl game as well. He didn't participate in that, so. I think Terrence is actually still in school here. I've had some communication with his folks and him, but he hasn't been with our team since probably 3 or 4 days prior to the bowl game.
Been building this roster for 4 years. How do you see that most, or where do you see that most?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I reached out to Pat one night. I was kind of going. I literally have a roster review. I would say almost on a daily basis where I go through the roster and kind of just look and see where we're at. And when I saw us settle in after our final transfer was in, that we were at 111 players, right? And of those 111 players, I believe 107 of those guys were players that we brought in a program. The 4 holdovers, Dylan Rosiak, Josh Kreutz, T. Strain, and somebody else. Those were guys that Lovey signed. Well, Lovey's staff had committed, and they signed that Wednesday before I took the job on Friday. So even though they were not guys that we signed, they were guys that we were the only coaches that had been here. And I was standing there today. We had testing this morning at 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. We had 2 groups Monday and 2 groups today that went through testing in every capacity. And I was standing there with Bart, and we were just looking at the offensive line. And we had 2 guys there that were PWO walk-ons for us in the offensive line that probably, in my opinion, would have been starters to 2 deep in my first year here. Just 2 really good players, and you got starting 5 players back, the way those guys look and the way they are. That's probably been the biggest eye-popping evolution. But then also today, we had testing on all of our positions, and the 3 receivers that joined us in January, Braden Trimble, J-Bo, and Hudson Clement. Those guys all broad jumped 10.5 or better, which would have been a record in my first year here, and now it's kind of the norm and the expectation, right? So just little things like that stand out to me about the kind of people we're bringing in the building.
I know you mentioned Eddie moving to the offensive side of the turf. Are there any other position changes?
Demetrius John, we moved back to the defensive line. Nobody really switching sides that I can think of. We had some guys moving around positions that we're even kind of just exploring that here in the first couple of weeks. But Eddie was a guy that super excited during the recruiting process, really gave him his choice, what he wanted to come in and do. And for a while I thought it was going to be offense, and then I thought it was swung to defense. And then, I think even really about midway through the year, our second bye week, I walked up to J-Mo and I said, I really think that Eddie would be a better player on that other side, but let's let him figure it out. And then lo and behold, literally before we even started up fall camp, Eddie reached out to me and said, hey, can we meet? And he said, can I move to the offense side? It's something I'd really like to do. And it had been going absolutely awesome. Unfortunately, just a freak just planted his foot and hurt his foot that needed and required surgery, but really that's about it.
And it's just one other roster. I didn't see Mountis either.
What's that, Mountis?
Yeah, what was his name?
So Mountis actually left the team last year. He wasn't with us probably midway through fall camp or whatever it was. He unfortunately just nothing more than just kind of just at a crossroads in his life where he kind of gave up football. So that's really nothing negative, positive. Still check on him. I know academically he's doing great. So yeah, he's here but not playing on the team.
The expectations of this season is really rare. In fact, honestly, one time in my lifetime. But there's an Illinois team that wins a lot of games and doesn't do it with senior. Has everything coming back. So this, I defer to Lauren. If it's there are other seasons like this, but 1990 is really the only other year in this place where winning team brings back a lot ranked preseason. Well, how do you approach that level of expectation?
To be honest, right, last year when we were going into fall camp, I have a roster sheet that defines it by class, right? And you just saw a bunch of names in the sophomore and junior slots that I knew we didn't have a very big senior class, 8 guys, but I knew some of these guys were going to play at an extremely high level. I thought Gabe would play high level. I thought Xavier would play high level. Thought that Luke would play high level. I thought some of these guys, and then the emergence of Melvin Priestley, J.C. Davis, guys that I knew that the retention wasn't going to be so much, their eligibility was whether or not the NFL was going to be good enough, right? Or they were going to be good enough for the NFL. And then I always worry about outside voices, right? I'm not oblivious to the fact that our guys were probably contacted by a number of college players, college programs that want their services. But I think the key was getting with Josh in the Department of and Catherine KK and Icon, and having a plan so that once the season was done, we were able to attack the players we wanted to retain through either Icon and a revenue share and lay out a plan. But I would say it's really just a lot of proactive communication that allowed it to happen. Xavier and Gabe, Luke Altmaier, Melvin Priestley, in particular Gabe and Xavier, those guys had pretty high-ranking NFL grades. For them to be able to forego the draft and come back, we're trying to get them to put a high-ranking draft on them. Come full circle yesterday, Nate Hobbs, right? I remember coming into the building and hearing about some players, and I turned on the film and watched Nate Hobbs, and if you ask Nate, I literally started calling that kid immediately, trying to get him to come back. I know Aaron sat down, I know Ryan sat down with him. I really could see that he was a very good player, and I thought if we brought him back, he could be drafted extremely high. And it's parlayed into exactly what you saw. Once he got around an environment he could be successful, that's happened. So I think the key for us is retention. Even like last year, I know there's going to be X number of players that are going to move on, but next year to me retain, foreshadowing guys like Matt Bailey. I think Hudson Clement's going to be a really good player. There's going to be a number of guys next year, offensively and defensively, that we're going to have to try to retain them to come back that next year. So retention is key. By the NCAA rules now, retention is easier than it's ever been, in theory, because you can do some things you've never been able to do before. So that part's exciting.
So starting with the spring, how do you set up the mentality of these guys are going to hear, the Athletic did one today, Illinois number 12. How do you deal with that level of, hey, there are serious expectations.
It's great. I think the true reference is nothing from last year carries to this year, right? So just really kind of harp on them every day. I saw guys in the last 2 days compete at the highest level against themselves, right? Like trying to, they did a 5-10-5 and they wanted that second time to be better than the first time, right? I think that's something that we know for us at Illinois, we got to carry a chip on the right shoulder and the left shoulder. We never erase that mentality. But I think it's really important for us to set the understanding. I've said it now to you guys, I've said to them on a daily, right? Like our biggest challenge and our biggest opponent to next year is Illinois, right? Like the 12 games we have guaranteed are obviously very, very challenging, but how the people in this room, how the coaches in this room manage it and understand it is going to be the truest definition of our success.
Bret, you talked about it earlier, but are you planning on like what would be considered veterans maintenance days this spring? Like in a sense of like, say a Gabe Yakas, Gabe, I don't need to see you today, but there's guys in your room where I need to see development.
Yeah.
Is that part of the plan or no?
Well, even going back to our first year, a guy like Owen Carney, guys that you realize had played some pretty good football and done some good things. We've been maintenance. There was a term we call it in the NFL. They call it maintenance. Means once you have a veteran player that's shown that he can play winning football, you don't need to see as much out of him as you do some of the young guys. You haven't seen that. So yeah, that's been going on in our program since day one. Gabe was actually under maintenance last year. I think there's a steady balance there. The good news is we got enough good players that need maintenance that also need to get good against each other, right? So iron sharpens iron. Like I would tell you that universally across the board, some of the best things that's happened in our building has the acquisition of new players in the building they've never seen before, right? So I would say Malik Elzy and Kapka Jones have played extremely well through the first 8 weeks of winter conditioning here, and I think a lot of that was because of the guys that have come in the building. Trey Petty is playing as good a football as I've seen him play. I think to walk in and have Carson Boyd come in, to have Ethan come in, just raises the awareness. Even our coaches, right? Like I've always said, like, one of the things I really learned from Bill when I walked in that Patriots organization was there was a huge amount of pressure to be the best at your position against all the other position coaches, right? And not be that cause of concern or that weak link. So like even amongst my coaches, I had wide receiver and DB drills up the other day, and I'd let Coach Stepp explain what his drill was, and I let Corey talk about what his drill was, and it was literally conflicting strategies against the same type of drill. So it was really fun to see the coaches be competitive, and I think that's the thing we've driven out of everything.
One more after this. You started offensive line, but you also need depth at that position. You were just talking about your depth.
Yeah.
Who are some of those guys? I know Aiden comes in, but who are some of the other guys?
So I would say that one guy, obviously, returned 4 accomplished players, right? Right guard, obviously, Zai started, Brandon Henderson started, but I would say, Brandon Henderson. Brandon Henderson is in my opinion, as good as he's ever been. But Brandon Hansen, I don't think there's anybody we're excited to see more than him. Kanopik is a guy that, comes in, and he, even though he's a guy that's played a lot of football at Idaho, he's got 2 years with 1 to play. His growth, his development has really been, very, very special. And then we're looking for guys, Zach Amlin, guys that are on that next wave of people to step up I think the part that's been fun for us is to see development. I saw Josh Geske and JC Davis, who in my opinion are a pretty good left guard tackle. They're competing against each other in the drill the other day. We're trying to drive each other to a higher level. So I think that part's important, but I do agree. I think we got to find our depth, especially backup center. I think Brandon Henderson did some really good things there. So to balance that out with with Cruci and the level that he's playing at has been awesome to watch. But yeah, I'd say that second string offensive line is a major emphasis for us in the spring.
Question about James White.
Last one.
What was the process of getting him on board? And after that, what do you think that he can do for just being around so many championship teams? What do you, project, or what do you want to see from him in his first year as a coach?
James, obviously I've known him since he's been probably 17 years old, right? And just stayed in constant communication with him. I did always think that, when you coach certain guys, you can kind of see that if they ever decide to go down this path, it'd be something they're probably pretty good at. Sometimes I've always said some of your greatest players maybe not make great coaches because they rely more on talent and ability than they did on intelligence and awareness, right? And I always thought James would be that guy that if he was he was extremely talented, but he's also extremely smart. So then I was with him in New England and kind of saw him grow he turned into a young man I recruited. Now he's a father. Now he's a major player on an NFL championship team. And then really 2 years ago, he started working at, I believe, Naperville North, if I'm not mistaken. He was working at a high school. I remember seeing a social media tweet, and I reached out to him. I said, "You got the itch, right?" And he kind of like, "I'm seeing." And then this past year with Thomas, he was with Thomas Hammock. Thomas was my running back coach at Wisconsin, and he was his running back coach there. So he started volunteering with Thomas and really throughout the entire fall. Was with him all year. I asked Ethan about him, and he talked about the impact that he had in that room. So I reached out to Thomas, and Thomas gave a double thumbs up, and so I reached out, and James hit me on a DM and said, "Hey, coach, if you got anything open, I've got the itch," right? So I literally called him that night, had the running back assistant job open, and brought him in at the end of that last week, and then kind of just took some days to think about it. I want to make sure this is exactly what he wanted to do, and yeah, he showed up on Monday, and been a great asset. I think one of the great things that happened during January, February is I lost, 3 of my coaches to the NFL, and as much as I don't like that, it does draw attention to our program and what that means. So anytime you lose four staff members to the NFL, people that acquire or who have an idea or a aspiration to coach either in college or NFL, that's a very positive thing for us.